The Ohio House reconvenes Monday, July 21st to override 3 of the 67 line-item budget vetoes by Governor Mike DeWine. They'll meet in the Senate because of maintenance work on the air conditioning system in the House chamber. The session will address 3 of the 4 property tax-related vetoes on provisions allowing county budget commissions to reduce voter-approved levies, requiring emergency and other levies to be used when calculating the 20 mil floor that is the effective tax rate, and limiting districts' power to ask for emergency levies. But the override session will not address the veto of the limit of collected property tax that districts can carry over at 40% of their operating budgets, with the rest refunded to taxpayers. Republican leaders have described that as immediate property tax relief, but districts have said it would send many into financial chaos and lead to more school levies, which DeWine noted in his veto message. One vocal supporter of the budget and critic of several of DeWine's vetoes is Senate Finance Chair Jerry Serino. I spoke to him this week.
We do not have a firm date yet. It's a matter of corralling all the members, many of whom are on vacation, some people probably out of the country. So I think the staff is working that issue right now to looking at other dates that we might need to be coming back to later in July or possibly even early in August. But it doesn't look like we're going to be able to do it the same date as the House is planning to.
Do you feel a time crunch or pressure to do this more quickly than you have the whole rest of the session to override these vetoes?
Well, there are some timing issues, the details of which I'm not exactly familiar with, but there are some school financial reporting deadlines that would be relevant to when this would become effective on the the property tax reform issue. So I think that's the deadline on that particular subject. On other subjects that were vetoed, we do, as you point out correctly, we do have lots more time to deal with any other vetoed material that we would like to address subsequently.
Is it fair to say that there are other vetoes that you were concerned about besides the property tax vetoes?
I think there's, I don't know that there's a consensus yet within the Senate of which those are and which ones are so important that we can't deal with either in other legislation separate from the budget bill, or that they are worthy of a veto override consideration. We're still working through those issues right now. But the property tax reform, I was very happy with a lot of the things that the governor approved and did not veto in the budget, and we appreciate that on his part. But I think the property tax reform was one that I think most of us were very disappointed that it got vetoed, because it's such an important issue to our taxpayers around the state right now. We have studied the issue quite a bit. We've already had a study committee, a joint committee between the House and Senate. They produced a 900-page report, I think close to 20 or 21 recommendations. We had hearings in our respective chambers as part of the budget process. And we spent a lot of time, I can tell you, in the conference committee between Representative Chair Stewart and myself and our respective teams, talking through all of the different scenarios in property tax reform to come up with what we finally included in the bill. I don't think we need another study committee to study the issue.
But it's fair to point out that the 21 recommendations that were put together by this bipartisan joint commission of lawmakers, none of those have passed yet.
Right. And again, it's my point in bringing that up is that we've studied it. We've listened to input. We've had lots of hearings. Whether or not those particular 21 recommendations made it into the budget bill, I think we would see some variations on some of their recommendations, certainly. But what we had in the budget bill is what we believed between the House and the Senate would be an appropriate, very good start to dealing with the property tax issues. It's not the final solution. It is not going to solve all of the problems, but when it comes to improved transparency and providing a lot more local control and authorization to deal with tax levies and property tax issues, I think that would have been a great start, and that's what we're looking to reestablish in any veto overrides.
The House is coming back to override 3 of the 4 property tax related vetoes. The highest profile one, though, is not on that list. That's the one that would set a cap of 40% of a district's operating budget that can be carried over in property taxes, with the rest refunded to taxpayers. Do you think there are the votes to override that cap, that veto on that cap?
I haven't been doing a very recent vote counting, but I do think there was a lot of interest. Obviously, it was part of the budget that the Senate passed. It was the House that came up with that concept in the first place with their 30% cap in their omnibus budget. We moderated that to 50%, and we ended up settling for 40% in the final budget bill as a compromise between the two chambers. I'm not sure what the rationale is, as the House has stated, in terms of why they are not planning to pursue that one. Again, that's one of those things that perhaps that's something that is pursued at a later date. I don't know the vote counts in the House, but obviously there's reasons why they're not bringing that one forward.
School districts have said that that cap would throw them into financial chaos, sending many of them into the red in the second year of the budget, even, and forcing them to go to voters for levies. Governor Mike DeWine mentioned that in his veto message. Well, I've talked to school funding expert Howard Fleeter, who says there are 370 districts with more than 40% carryover. They'd have to start refunding money to taxpayers under the bill that was the budget bill that was passed. 353 districts were under the 50% past fiscal year. And Auditor Keith Faber has said his financial health indicators for schools says a district is in financial caution if the carryover balance is under 50%. So is the cap really an idea that you think that can be maintained or can be supported?
Well, that perhaps is why the House has decided not to address that one now for in trade for further study and discussion. The whether it's the 30, 40, or 50% cap limit, there has always been, and we made allowances for this in the budget that we passed, for capital dollars to be set aside, taken outside of that cap calculation, as well as some other provisos that would have given more flexibility, even at the 40% level. But I think, look, we have $10 billion of year over year carryovers in our school systems in the aggregate right now. That is ridiculous. That's half of what we pay in property taxes in a given year. And so in the aggregate, that has to be addressed. That is way too much to be carrying over. Yes, individual school systems have unique circumstances, and perhaps that's something that we should look at, as we address this issue in the future. But taxpayers who are screaming about tax valuations and property tax bills have a difficult time, in the ones I've talked with, reconciling having $10 billion of carryover sitting in our 611 school systems.
For the more than 230 districts that are under the 40% carryover, how does the cap provide property tax relief for them?
Well, it would. The other parts of the bill certainly would trigger an evaluation by the budget commissions, which we're giving greater authority to in the bill, to make those determinations and to decide whether or not any money should be rolled back. And remember, too, that the state of Ohio, while we don't levy property taxes, not one dime of property taxes, we actually pay some property taxes for the citizenry. We pay, with the rollback, we pay close to, in the owner occupied 2%, we're actually paying about 12% of everybody's property taxes through the state. Okay. So not only do we not levy taxes, we're actually doing the opposite. We're paying taxes, which most people do not realize. But what our biggest goal here with this bill, with this component of the bill, was to provide greater transparency so that people know what they're voting on, and how their tax assessments are being levied by not just schools, but other levies that are in every county right now: libraries, senior citizens, Adams Board. There are lots of other things that are levied against somebody's property value. We want to see more local transparency and local authority to make changes, because every community is a little different. And I think empowering the local officials, the budget commission, and in a couple of small cases, the county commissioners, the ability to make adjustments as they see fit. They're responsible to the voters on a regular basis. And if they don't make the right decisions to give some property tax relief when they can and should, they're going to have to answer to the voters.
I may be saying this, but I know I've heard from other lawmakers that property taxes are the complaint they get most common from constituents. Constituents have been howling for some relief from property tax rising values and those rising bills. In the budget that passed, you did do a flat income tax, which turns out to be an income tax cut. That's about $1 billion that the state will spend on that. Why didn't you choose to use that $1 billion for property tax relief instead of an income tax cut? You have a lot of people saying income tax cuts are not something they necessarily wanted to see.
Well, we've had our legislature for the last 10 years, particularly, has been whittling down the tax rate and the number of brackets, as you know. So this shouldn't have come as a surprise to anybody that we were headed in this direction. I think by having a flat tax at the end of the second year of the biennium here of 2.75%, we're going to be joining 14 other states in a flat tax, and we will be the best flat tax rate of all of our neighboring states. That's important to make sure that we have a vibrant economy, an attractive economy for people, for businesses to come to Ohio. The property tax issue is, we all know, is the biggest component of what has caused this is inflation. Inflation caused by Washington spending and borrowing to an extent that we've never seen before. Okay, that is what causes mortgage rates to go up, which causes fewer transactions, which means that less of something means that the other things that are out there are worth more, right? And so those have been the biggest contributing factors. Those will come and those will go. But what we're trying to do is provide some means and mechanisms in this bill for local governments to make adjustments on property tax levies, to make sure that there's not too much carryover that is in excess of what they need to be fiscally viable. And that's the best thing that we can do at the state level. We unfortunately don't have the funds to be able to just pay everybody's property taxes, or to go to the other extent, these people that are gathering signatures right now to eliminate property taxes with no substitute that they're suggesting. We collect about $21 billion a year in property taxes. Okay. And as I said before, it's not just the schools, it's other community organizations that provide services, whether it's fire and safety, senior citizens, Adams Board, et cetera. If they just get rid of the property taxes, all of those things, the support for all of those things goes away. I think it's very, very irresponsible for them to try to key off of people's being upset with property tax levels, but to go to this extent without having an alternative that is viable is irresponsible.
The Legislative Service Commission did a study that said that since 2005 and all the tax cuts, the income tax cuts that have happened since then, it's about $72 billion in income taxes that have not gone to income taxes to the state. Do you think the state has gotten $72 billion worth of economic growth? Has it been worth it to cut taxes, income taxes, that much?
Yeah, if you look at our GDP growth over the last 10 to 12 years, the GDP growth suggests, and I don't think it suggests, I think it actually demonstrates that we have grown our gross domestic product here in the state of Ohio, coincident with those reductions in taxes. There are other factors that help support GDP growth, but clearly it's not hurting our economy. It's not destroying our economy, as some have said. And we're also able to spend so much money on so many other projects and programs. Almost half of our budget is Medicaid related. Okay, and we've increased that. We've increased spending for schools for K through 12 by almost $1 billion in this biennium budget. We've increased so many other services for those in need, in programs that are worthy of our support, without having to sacrifice the support, but at the same time making sure that we are doing the right things for economic development that are going to make sure that we have a very vibrant and growing economy in the future. Because without that, we are not going to be able to sustain supporting all of these other programs that support people in need.
Let's talk about the other side, people who are not in need. You've got $600 million in this budget that did stand. It was not vetoed, that goes to a grant for the Cleveland Browns Dome Stadium in Brook Park. And it's part of the $1.7 billion in this cultural and sports facilities fund that came from unclaimed funds. Two Democratic former lawmakers, Jeffrey Crossman and Mark Dan, say they're suing the state over this, saying the state does not have the authority to take ownership of those unclaimed funds. How confident are you that the state can survive this lawsuit, that you have the authority to do what the budget does?
Right. Well, look, we've done a lot of legal research as we were working on and planning on this project, this approach to financing not just the Browns project, but other development projects in the future. Look, I'll tell you what, and you compare the governor's approach, which was to double taxes on gambling. We don't like to raise taxes in our caucus, certainly. The House plan, which was to borrow through bonding and pay $400 million over 25 years in debt service out of the general fund, I would add, that was not a viable approach. So we looked around for another way to do it in ways that wouldn't be, strict debt, certainly would never jeopardize the state's status from a bond rating standpoint of AAA. And we looked and we found all this lazy money. We have $4.8 billion sitting in unclaimed funds right now. And keep in mind, Karen, that those funds, by the time they get to the state, they have already resided in banks or insurance companies or credit card companies, any number of places for a number of years, 5 years, 10 years, sometimes even longer, where they have sought to try to find the rightful owners, right? And unsuccessfully, and then they hand it over to the state. And we are now going to have a 10-year time period before the actual legal term called escheatment takes place, when the state actually takes possession. And keep in mind too, every year we take in between $200 and $300 million more of unclaimed funds. So that is going to be perpetuated, and it is not going to put in jeopardy anybody's rightful claim to funding that they're due if they do it within the time period that we're talking about here.
Talked a little bit before about funding for people in need. I got to ask that there's folks who feel like this is a bad look for the state, that there are a lot of people who are struggling with property taxes and that sort of thing. But then the state has offered $600 million to billionaires, one of whom just went and bought a $25 million mansion in Florida. Do you feel like there's a bad look here potentially that you have to defend?
Well, if the look is a balanced look, I don't think it's a bad look. I mean, first of all, we're not giving $600 million to anybody. Okay, we are putting to work $600 million that is sitting in unclaimed funds doing nothing, and we have a schedule that's in the bill with the Haslam Sports Group in this particular project's case, where we are going to be paid back with incremental taxes that we are not getting today, from both the payroll taxes in the construction phase, as well as with sales taxes and commercial activity taxes through the course of the years. We will get our $600 million back plus interest over 16 years, according to the plan that we have. And that money coming in is going to go into the general fund so that we can fund other projects and other support services that are so important to people in need. So this is really, if the look is very narrow and it's like, well, you gave money here and you're not doing it here, we have to look at it from the standpoint that it's creating an economic environment and an economic output that enables us to do these other things that are so important for those in need.
And finally, the budget overall, you've got advocates for a variety of groups saying it doesn't fully fund the Fair School Funding Plan. It cuts funding to the H2O Ohio Clean Water Program, cuts funding for affordable childcare, for libraries, among other criticisms. You had said on the floor in the Senate when you were introducing the budget that it clearly displays the Senate's intent to support families, children, life, economic growth, and the delivery of healthcare services and education. You've got people who say that they feel the budget doesn't do that. They question the truth of that statement.
Well, I believe that statement, and I believe it to be true. And I think the problem that the Democrats and other critics have of the budget is I would have to use the quote, "It's never enough" to some of these people. In some cases, we have not made cuts. We've reduced the rate of growth. In the case of libraries, for example, we made a couple of changes. We're still giving the libraries close to $1 billion every 2 years. We have made a change structurally that it's not automatic as a percentage of revenue. That every 2 years they've got to, along with everybody else, come to the legislature and make a case for whatever funding and appropriation they would like to get. I don't think that's asking too much for libraries who have many of whom have I think, engaged in mission creep, meaning they're starting to provide lots of services to the communities that are not traditional library functions. And if the communities want those, that's fine. The community should pay for those things. But I think the accusations that we went light on so many important services to our citizens, I think it's unwarranted.
Serino added that he's pleased with what he's hearing from state university presidents about their compliance with Senate Bill 1, the law he sponsored that went into effect last month, banning most mandatory diversity training and faculty strikes, among other changes. Volunteers led by some faculty members from Youngstown State University gathered around 195,000 signatures to try to repeal the law, but that is well short of the 248,000 signatures they needed to bring the law to voters and block it from taking effect.